bustling city. We have lots of interesting architecture because we lost, of course, a lot of our architecture after the Second World War. And next to that, it's a very multicultural city.
I think it's a city where if you have a good idea, you can realize it. So it's a city which gives you chances to reach your goals.
So Dig It Up is a cultural, it's a cultural heritage lab in the city, and it collects sort of hidden gems from different sources.
So we have all kinds of projects. Really the funny thing is the only criteria is that it's in Rotterdam, and it can go from gay history to architecture to pedal cars. It's just really a wide spectrum. And that's also a really fun thing. We noticed that how smaller the subject is, the more impact it has, because then it starts meaning a lot for a lot of people, because these stories haven't been told before.
Dig It Up is a partner which finds its existence in digging heritage stuff from attics and cellars in normal houses. But they try to involve the citizen of Rotterdam in finding interesting stuff around themes.
It has a much closer bond with the city than the City Archive does. The City Archive has a little bit of distance to it, and Dig It Up is much more approachable. So Dig It Up does active projects. It goes out and does calls to action in regards to collecting heritage, things that people have in their attic that they mightn't have thought about, different aspects of culture that we would not have a direct line into as a government organisation.
I think a thing you notice is that if you're looking at recorded history, is that like the personal stories, the stories of the people themselves and the material, it's not being added to the archives. And with that, also part of that is writing history and enabling the public to be co-authors in this process. It really gives so much value. And also sometimes you have this idea that heritage is boring, but it's not. And actually, but it can become boring if the only narrative you're taking is that of the official stories, of the official happenings. But actually by making them co-authors, it becomes way more interesting.
I think when we talk about heritage, people tend to give you a very bored look because heritage sounds a bit everything that's old, things that belong in the past. But I think that most people don't realize that heritage is, or cultural heritage is very much about the present as well. So cultural heritage to me are those memories, experiences both from the past and the present that we want to safeguard and preserve and make accessible for future generations.
I think it's important to record people's lived experiences, because lived experience are history. They become history the next day, in a couple of weeks. So the quicker we can get to taking that up and to recording that, the better. We miss a lot of chances. You miss 100% of the chance you don't take. And if you don't provide structures for people to record life during Corona, to record Black Lives Matter, to record LGBT history, to record the changing history of the harbour, to record newcomers into the city, to record different cultural events, different types of community events, different celebrations. If you don't record them, we lose them.
Pandora's Music Box is a great example where we found 6,500 pictures that were supposed to be sent up in space. So there was this New Wave festival in the 80s, and to enter there you had to have your picture taken. And this was going to be sent up in space, but this never happened, and we found these pictures, and you find so many people trying to find themselves in their 20s in their best outfits. It's really fun. On the other hand, a great example I like to tell is that of the pedal car. So in the 50s, 60s and 70s, you have this street photographer family, the Randolphis, and they would stand outside our city zoo, Blijdorp Zoo, and they would have this little pedal car, and you could put your child in it, you could pay 1 guilder, they'd take a picture, and the next day you could pick it up. And we decided to do a project about this, and we asked people to bring in their materials. So over 200 people came with their pictures. They peeled it out of their photo albums and the frames. You could see the little corners still in it. And we did this project. And the whole time that we had this project, we were wondering what actually happened to the archive of the Randolphi brothers. Because to have this like human perspective, like this material in an age where there wasn't that much like amateur photography, and they were of course professional also, but it's a different story than what, for example, a press photographer would take as a picture. And then one day there was this guy, he had like matted hair and he kind of looked weird, who walked into our gallery when the exhibit was open, and we're like, what are you doing here? But as it turned out, he was the long lost son of the Randolphi brothers. And he was able to tell us that their archive of his parents when they died was thrown out. And this is really just, for me, it's so terrible, because they were not only at the Blijdorp Zoo, they were also at, in the city center here and at the Holland-Amerika line. This is the place where the ships to America left. So that's such a big loss. So that's a really important way of finding this material. In the end, the only way was to actually have these individual pictures brought in by the different Rotterdam people.
I believe in crowd sourcing. I believe in the knowledge of the crowd. We don't have the knowledge of the crowd. And Dig It Up with their volunteers. They engage the communities, and with that comes the knowledge of the crowd.
And without Dig It Up, probably a lot of lost heritage, because we actually make people aware of the fact that they do own interesting stuff, which ultimately makes our history visible, touchable, palpable in that way.
Another way to add crowdsourcing or community archiving is by actually having the people working on your project be involved at some part of the process. So for me, our breakdance exhibit is a great example of that. And there we had the curators, but even the graphical designer, everybody was actually a breaker themselves. And this adds so much, because they're going to be telling the story. They're going to make the choices in style and tone of voice. And instead of making a story about people, if you have the people make the story themselves, it's going to be so much realer. It's going to be so much more in depth. It's going to automatically hit the target audience that you want to hit, because you're not thinking for them, they're doing it themselves. And this is really what we always do with Dig It Up. Always have different people in the project that are actually living or just from the subject itself. And the third way, which I think is also very important, is with the metadata. So this is like the who and where and all these things that you see in the picture, the technical information basically. And basically what we say is you can have this amazing person who studied a lot and he has tons of degrees. And if he's going to describe a picture of this feminist movement in the 70s, he's just going to come with platitudes. It's going to be, okay, this is where it happened and whatever. But if you have the women who were actually there start describing this material, you're going to have so much more information. So yeah, we try to find that balance, and these are the ways that I would encourage everybody to try in either way, material, project leaders or project assistants, or in describing the material, add people from the subject, add people from the public, and have them participate in this process.
We miss the knowledge once it gets to the archive. There's a disconnect. And so if you let people describe their own history, then you deliver more to the end product. Because if it goes into Dig It Up and then they decide they would also like to deposit it with the city archive, we have a complete resource.
Oral histories can really complement written archives and document the ordinary experiences of, or the experiences of ordinary citizens and their daily lives. And on the other hand, it's also important to collect oral histories because it gives a voice to people who may feel unheard in society. And so it's a way to complement the archive and give a voice to citizens whose voices are not reflected in the written records. So we want to make sure that the oral histories that are collected by organizations like Dig It Up are stored and deposited at different types of institutions so that these oral histories can be made available for different types of audiences. For instance, it's important to not only make sure that ordinary citizens can find and use these stories through the Dig It Up website, but we find it's also very important that they're stored at the municipal archive and also made available in digital research infrastructures like Claria, which is the Dutch research infrastructure for the humanities and the arts. And our story cycle model is intended to design a workflow that organizations like Dig It Up can use to make the data that they collect, the oral histories that they collect, available for a very diverse audience, so that these oral histories can be reused by citizens themselves through Dig It Up or through the municipal archive, but also by researchers and lecturers and teachers and journalists, for instance, through a research infrastructure like Claria.
Most museums, most heritage institutions are not involved in dealing with recent stuff. And with recent, I mean the last 75 years. Dig It Up tries to compose themes and tries to present these themes, for which they ask the people of Rotterdam to dig in their own houses to find stuff related to that theme. And that's a unique way. The point is, once they found it and it's brought together, Dig It Up is archiving it and bringing it to these just mentioned heritage institutions where it can be taken care of.
Professional historians, when they use oral history, are very reluctant to share their oral histories as data with other researchers or store it in an archive. And organizations like Dig It Up are very eager to share what they've collected and make sure that it can have an impact in research, in education, and also in policy making.
There is an interesting connection between the public library and Dig It Up in a way that we don't make heritage, we don't own heritage except for our Erasmus collection, but we do find ways to present the exhibitions of Dig It Up in our main buildings. We have huge spaces. In a year time, some 2.7 million people walk by these presentations. So it's also for Dig It Up a major way to present their exhibitions.
The relationship between past, present and future is really important here. If we want to know who we are as a community, if we want to think about more productive ways in which we can live together as a society, it's not only important to look at the future, but to also look at one's past. And I strongly believe that the three are connected to each other. So I think that is the importance of Dig It Up, that is the importance of community history.
I would love to just keep on doing what we're doing. We really want to, instead of just making our own projects, continue with enabling other people to tell their stories.
One of our main goals at the moment is to work together, collaborate with other organizations in the city. So we are very busy to build up our networks within the city. That's also why we're working together with Dig It Up and lots of other organizations. And my dream, I also have a dream, is to have a kind of a shop in the city centre of Rotterdam where we all can work together.
I think Rotterdam is a very lively and multifaceted city. I don't think there's an end to what heritage can be. I think there's ways of looking at what heritage is. What the archive has in its acquisition plan, for example, might be different than what the people view as heritage. I think whatever gets people enthusiastic about their heritage is the best way to go about things.
One last thing, I would like to say, heritage belongs to us all.